Hello everybody, welcome to my studio. Hopefully you're all having amazing creative days. So today we're going to be talking about the EOS R5 and I'm going to give you a video menu settings walkthrough. So we're going to go through all the different video types you can shoot with the R5, and then I'm going to go through a bunch of video settings that you can change in the menu to adjust your videos. Then I'm going to show you the Q menu or quick menu, and we're going to go through all the different things you can quickly access on the back of your screen during production, so you can quickly make adjustments here and there. And yeah, then that's it. That's going to be the video. All right, buckle up. Let's start with something super important for those of you who are new to shooting video. All right, before we get into the camera settings, there's one thing I want to talk to you guys about, and this is for people who are new to video, because if you don't know this rule and you try and record video with the camera, you're going to screw up the video. It's going to look terrible anyway. So all those settings don't even matter. So here's the thing. There's something called a 180-degree shutter rule. I'm just going to give you the basic gist of it. I would suggest you go look it up and research it before you start shooting video with the camera. But basically what the rule says is that your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames a second, your shutter speed should be at 50. If you're shooting slow mode, 120 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 240. Super simple. Just, you know, if you don't know that rule, definitely look it up, educate yourself. And now let's get into the camera settings. All right, one more thing we got to talk about before we jump into the menu, and that is that there are different menus on the R5. You have one menu in video mode, and you have another menu in photo mode. Yes, there is some crossover, but in general, there are options in the video mode menu that you're not going to see in photo mode and vice versa. So make sure you are in the video mode menu in manual mode on the camera. And in Canon's genius idea, they decided not to put a dedicated photo video switch on the EOS R5. So if you're buying this camera secondhand, you don't have your instruction manual. This is how you switch modes. Hit the mode button on the top of the camera and then hit the info button on the back of the camera or the info button on the LCD screen. And that's how you switch between photo and video modes. I've got a whole video dedicated here to tips and tricks on how to switch modes fast and little hacks with the camera. If you're a hybrid shooter like me and you want to watch that, I would definitely recommend it. And yeah, so make sure you're in video mode and make sure your camera's in manual. And now let's jump into the menu. All right, let's look at movie recording options with the R5. Let's get the spectacles on. So if we go to the menu, page 1, you'll see here movie record quality. So you click on that and you have 3 options here: movie record size, high frame rate, 4K HQ mode. So let's start with movie record size. And this menu by Canon is absolutely brilliant. So you have all your stuff here. So here you have your resolutions, or like the size of your video. You have 8KD, 8KU, and 8KD stands for DCI and U stands for UHD. I'm gonna post the info right here so you can take a look, pause the video if you wanna read over that if you're not sure what that is. But then you have 4KD, 4KU, and FHD, which is straight up 1080p. And then here below that, in the second row, you have your frame rate. You got 59.9, 29.97. We don't get 24 here, but we got 23.98. And the cool thing is that depending on what settings you pick, the camera will gray out the options that aren't available to you. So that's pretty awesome. And of course, at the bottom, you have your compression, or you can call them codecs if you want. So if we go to 8K, that's how we can get RAW, and then RAW Lite, which is slightly more compressed. And RAW is just like raw video, and you can edit everything in post, and it takes I don't want to say it takes a lot of work, but if you're more hands-on with your video and you want to do that, then record RAW. File sizes are massive. All-I is a great codec. That's the one I prefer to use, and it just gives you a nice, robust, very like bitrate heavy codec with a lot of information that you can color grade. And it's really good quality. I really like All-I. IPB is like a super compressed kind of codec, and the thing is, it's so compressed that it takes your computer a little bit of effort to uncompress it. So when you're scrubbing through your timeline, it might get a little choppy. And then you have IPB Lite, which is the most compressed file you can get out of the R5. So one thing we'll note here is if we look up at the top of the screen here, as I jump around between the different codecs, you can see total record time changes. So you can see how much time you have left on your card based on what settings you're using here. This is an awesome menu, but I wish that Canon put the 4K 120 and log settings, and what was the other one, 4K HQ. I wish those settings were in this menu so you didn't have to go out of this menu in order to access those settings. It would have just made everything super simple to have it all in one place. So in order to access those, we got to get out of here. We hit the menu button and here we go, high frame rate. So you click on that and you enable, and now you can shoot at 120 frames per second slow-mo. And if we go into the movie record size, you can see that our options are limited now. So this is all we can do with 4K 120. We got 4KD, 4KU, and 1080p. All right, pro tip. Now remember the 180-degree rule, right? So if we're gonna shoot slow motion at 120 frames per second, our shutter speed needs to be double that. So set your shutter to 240 frames or 240th of a second in order to shoot slow-mo. Don't forget that, pro tip. 4K HQ mode, and this is one of my favorite modes to shoot in. So the camera will actually take 8K video and compress it to 4K in camera. And what happens is when you take something at a higher resolution and you shrink it down to a lower resolution, the sharpness, the crispness, the edge detail, everything becomes a lot better. So you get a really nice sharp image in the 4K HQ. So let's enable that. And if we go up to movie record size, you can see here that the options have changed again. We get all IPB, IPB light, 4KD, 4KU. And one thing I'll point out here is that if you look at the menu, it says 4KD fine, 4KU fine, and 4K, the fine and HQ is the same, so don't get confused. It's a quirk in the menu. Canon hasn't fixed that since day one. This has been here since the camera was launched in 2020. So 4K fine, 4K HQ, same thing, so don't get confused. Okay, so one more thing in terms of like recording options. If we go here to page 3, we have Canon log settings. So you can click on that and you select, and you have Canon log and you have Canon log 3. I'm not gonna get into the full details with Canon log, but basically, if you've ever seen that footage that's kind of grayed out and it's just not very contrasty, everything looks super flat, that's what log is. And what a log allows you to do is add in the contrast and the color tones and all that stuff in post. So if you want complete control over your video settings or how your video looks and you really want to color grade everything, then log is the one for you. Apparently C-Log 3 has more dynamic range than regular C-Log. So if you're gonna do it, I would recommend C-Log 3, but hey, there you go. Now you know. Let's turn that off because I don't really shoot in log. And if you're wondering what I shoot my YouTube videos in, all right, so a few thoughts on codecs. Which one should you use? For me, when I shoot for clients, I will shoot in all I. I really like the robustness. I'll put 4K HQ all I, and that's what I shoot for client work. If I really have to, I'll shoot RAW or C-Log, but it depends on the shoot, but usually I don't. I shoot a lot of talking head stuff, interview type stuff. So all I, 4K HQ is fine. When it comes to social media, like if you want to shoot for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Reels, Shorts, all that kind of stuff, IPB or IPB light is just fine if you don't plan on doing some kind of heavy color grading. Like I can do pretty good color grading on all I. Obviously you want to shoot RAW or C-Log if you really want to go crazy with the cheese whiz when it comes to color grading. But if you just want to record a video, do some light grading, throw it up on social media, IPB is fine. My YouTube videos are all shot in IPB and not even 4K HQ, just IPB regular 4K, and then export, upload to YouTube, and it's fine. Like you can tell the difference between IPB and all I and 4K HQ when you pixel peep. But in general, most people are looking at YouTube videos on their phone, laptop screens, that kind of thing. And if you have to pixel peep to really see the difference on those social media platforms, then is there really a difference? All right, so future me jumping into the video, I figured this would be a good opportunity to talk about memory cards and the Canon EOS R5. So if you want to be able to record 8K, 8K RAW, 4K HQ for long periods of time, you need a memory card or a CF Express card that can handle that. And here's a learning mistake that I made. I bought a SanDisk 128 gig CF Express card when I started. And apparently this is what I learned, is that these cards that have the lower memory or whatever lower storage don't read info as fast as the bigger cards. So when I was recording 8K with the R5, R5 would stop recording and say card read speed too slow or something like that. I got an error message. So don't make the same mistake I did and waste your money. You need a 512 gigabyte card or more if you want to be shooting 8K, 8K RAW. I mean, they're going to be massive file sizes, so you want a big card anyway. But just so you know, you need bigger cards because they can read write faster. Now, if you want to save some money with SD or CF Express cards, I strongly recommend Angelbird. I bought an Angelbird 512 gig card a couple years ago. I've been using it for all my projects with the R5. It records all the high-end video. It's just as fast, can read and write. It's just as fast as the SanDisk cards, but it's half the price. And if you get it on sale, it's even less than half the price of a SanDisk card. So I'm gonna put affiliate links down below in the description. You can go check them out for yourself. And you know, if you wanna purchase something, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help out the channel and it helps me make more of these videos for you guys. All right, speaking of which, back to the video. All right, so now that you have an understanding of all the different recording modes or video styles you can record in, let's take a look at some menu settings that can affect how your video looks. So let's get started here. We're gonna start on the red tab, page 2, highlight tone priority. Now this is something I recommend you turn on. What it does, it affects photos and videos, but what it'll do is it'll prevent you from going to an ISO lower than 200, but on the other side of the coin, it'll preserve highlight details and highlights, or it'll preserve details and highlights. So if you're shooting in super high contrasty situations, or you're shooting a landscape, the sun is setting or whatever, or you're shooting a wedding, you know, brides in a white dress, grooms in a black tux, lots of contrast. So if you want to preserve details and highlights and kind of like help prevent blowouts, definitely enable highlight tone priority, D+. That's a huge benefit right there. All right, so white balance. Usually when I'm shooting with just one camera, I have my white balance set to auto. Canon's auto white balance is pretty good, but here's a pro tip for you. If you're shooting with multiple cameras, just dial in the white balance manually on all your cameras, because what'll happen is you have a camera looking at one angle, one camera looking from another angle, one camera sees one auto white balance, the other one sees another auto white balance. And when you splice that footage together in your editor, one will look blue, one will look yellow, it'll be a mess, it'll be jarring, it's gonna create discontinuity between frames. So definitely, pro tip, dial in your white balance manually on all the cameras, make them the same. Lens aberration correction, this you wanna turn on, turn everything on. And what that basically is like Canon has profiles in the firmware for all its lenses. And when you add those lenses to your camera, the camera will say, hey, I'm using this lens has vignette, so let's light up the corners, or this lens has chromatic aberration in this situation, let's fix that. So it's basically lens correction that happens in camera and it's baked into your video. So when you pop it onto your computer, you're good to go. You just start editing and you go. I'm not sure 100% if these corrections affect raw footage or not. I would assume it doesn't, because raw should just be raw and uncorrected. But there you go. Definitely you want to turn those on. High ISO speed noise reduction. I set it to standard when I first bought the camera. I haven't touched it since. I haven't really noticed any issues with noise with the R5. So there it is. HDR movie recording. I don't really do that. Time lapse. Why are you disabled? Available connect. Oh, because I got the HDMI connected in here. Okay, so you do have time lapse available. You can shoot time lapse in 4K. You can shoot time lapse in 8K and 1080p. You know, you pick your interval. I think minimum is 2 seconds, and you pick your duration and how many frames, and you set the camera and it goes. And the beautiful thing is it'll do the time lapse in the camera. So when you download the file, it'll be one full video already put together in time lapse. So that's great. IS mode on. I think that's the IBIS in the camera. Digital IS gives you like an enhanced IS. So if your footage is still too shaky handheld and you want more, you can turn on digital IS, which crops into your video for stabilization, and then enhanced will crop in even more. All right, so here's an important one, and this is shutter button function for movies. And let's go in here. Now, when you half press the shutter button, it starts to meter and servo autofocus. And then when you fully press the shutter all the way down, you can set it to actually start recording a movie, which I urge you not to turn on this setting, because you have a record button on the top of the camera for recording movies. The thing is, if you have your shutter button set to record movies, and let's say you're a hybrid shooter, you're switching between photo and video all the time, and you're shooting a wedding, and then you start hitting your shutter button, but you're actually recording movies instead of taking photos, and you fill up your memory card and you got a lot of nonsense. So just something to keep in mind. I definitely would recommend keeping this function off. So set it to no function. Okay, this is super important. If you shoot regular standard 4K, you don't have to worry too much about overheating. But if you're shooting 4K HQ and 8K 120 slow motion, definitely set this to high. So this is the auto power off temp. I believe this was introduced after firmware 160. So if you're below 160, definitely do your firmware update to get this setting. So set it to high. and that'll prevent the camera from shutting down as soon as it thinks it's hot. And the other thing you can do is turn on standby low res mode. Keep that on. So what that setting does is, let's say you're recording 8K video with your camera, right? And then you stop recording and you're, looking at your footage or whatever. The display on the back of the camera, the LCD, is still gonna be recording 8K and displaying that on the back of the screen. So when you turn on standby low res mode, when you turn off the recording, it's just gonna do like 1080p footage on the back. It's gonna be low res. It's not gonna actually be capturing 8K and displaying it on your screen. So that saves on heat because the camera's not processing 8K footage. So it'll keep your camera cooler. It'll probably save you battery life as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so now autofocus method. These are just your autofocus method types, what zone you wanna focus with. I usually just keep it here on tracking people, and that is it. And what you can do is you can actually double tap the screen to track something. So if you have, let's say, eye tracking enabled and you're tracking a bride at a wedding and you're tracking your eye and you're making video, and now you wanna track, let's say she's holding a martini glass and you wanna track the glass, you can just double tap on the back of the screen and the camera will jump to whatever you double tap on. So if you double tap on the martini glass, it'll start tracking that instead of her eyes. And eventually it'll go back to tracking her eyes, or you can double tap on her eyes and it'll go back to tracking eyes. But you can switch what the camera's tracking on the fly, which is absolutely awesome. So here we go, subject to detect. I shoot people, so I have it on people. If you're, shoot animals, put on animals or vehicles or none, whatever you like. So you have to select your subject matter. Now, eye detection, make sure that's enabled. I mean, you don't want to just track people but not enable eye detection, so definitely turn that on. And the thing is, you can accidentally turn that off. Let's see if I can show you here. I don't think I can access the Q menu, can I? No, I'm gonna have to actually record the back of my screen to show you that. But there are ways where you can accidentally turn off eye detection. I will show you that later in the video, so stick around. Okay, movie servo autofocus. I just keep it on servo, which is like continuous autofocus. Touch and drag settings is also important. So you want to enable touch and drag settings, which allows you to drag your focus point and different things on your LCD screen on the back of the screen. I set mine to relative instead of absolute. Absolute just means that if you touch the top right of your screen, the focus point's gonna go to the top right. If you touch the bottom left, focus point will go to the bottom left. But relative means like if you swipe up, the focus point will move up. If you swipe down, it'll move down. So it acts more like a mouse rather than absolute points on the screen. So relative, I find, works faster. And then you can select your active touch area. I keep mine on the right side because it's easily accessible with my thumb as I'm holding the camera up to my eye. I can touch it, but depending on what you want, you can change your different settings like this. So definitely recommend turning that on. Okay, now these settings here are for people who shoot with vintage lenses, cinema lenses, or any kind of lens that doesn't have autofocus. These are autofocus assist settings. So manual focus peaking you can turn on, and the screen will actually display what's in focus by putting a little like colored border around it. So you can select what color you want, red, yellow, blue. And then focus guide is like a little guide that appears to let you know when things are in focus, so you can turn that on and off. So movie servo AF speed. You can actually, in video mode, you can actually adjust how fast your lens focuses. So if you want something more cinematic, you can just slow down your autofocus speed here. You can go all the way down and the camera will focus, it'll rack focus from something, whatever you're focused on, to something else. It'll just focus really slowly. I find, -4 is pretty good for a nice cinematic rack focus. And then for YouTube stuff, because I'm always holding products up in front of the camera, I just leave it on fast because I don't want to hold up a product and the camera slowly focuses on it. So I just keep it on fastest, but you do have that option. You can change it however you like. Movie AF tracking sensitivity. So you can set your camera to be locked on. So if you tap on something, it'll stay locked onto that, or you can set it to be responsive so it quickly jumps to different things. So depending on what you're shooting, or you can keep it in the middle. I prefer locked on because when I tell the camera to lock onto something, then it stays locked on. Lens electronic MF, I don't really mess around with that. Switching track subjects. So you can have it set to stick to initial priority, middle ground somewhere or whatever, and then switch subjects. So it's very similar to the first one. I put it on initial priority, so whatever I click on first, that's what I want you to track. I don't want the camera to start thinking about, oh, maybe that tree is a face. Maybe I'll track that. No. Just whatever I click on and that's it. All right, so let's talk about eco mode for a second. I suggest you turn eco mode off. When you have it on, the camera will conserve battery power by shutting down and turning off the screen and so on and so forth. And when you're filming talking head stuff like this, YouTube videos, interview videos, or anything like that, it's just so frustrating because, you turn away to check the script or you talk to a client, you guide the model, and you come back to your camera and it's off and it's like, oh, gotta turn it on again. So I strongly recommend turning eco mode off, but I also strongly recommend picking up a dummy battery. So that's just a battery with an electrical cord sticking out of it that plugs into the mains. You can plug it into extension cord, power bar. Here's my setup here. I have a power bar under my camera on my tripod. Links up to the dummy battery. I have my lights and everything else hooked up to that power bar. So it makes filming super handy and you never have to worry about your camera running out of power again. I'm going to put Amazon affiliate links down in the description. If you want to pick one up for yourself, definitely go check it out. Okay, so now we have shutter at shutdown, and this is something I recommend turning on. And what happens is the shutter will actually close when you turn off the camera. So if you're changing your lenses in a dusty, let's say wedding hall or sports arena, the likelihood of dust getting onto your sensor is pretty low. Just remember one thing, if the shutter is down, don't touch it. Like if you're blowing in there to get dust out and you accidentally spit on it, just let the spit dry. Don't physically try and touch the shutter. It's super thin metal and you can easily bend it and wreck it. And yeah, that's the end of that for your camera. Custom shooting modes. So you can save your custom shooting modes. I mean, that's, everybody knows that, nothing special there. But there's something interesting that happens here. If you're a hybrid shooter and you're jumping between photo and video mode all the time, whatever setting you set to the C3 custom shooting mode in video mode will be the setting that the camera records with when you're in photo mode and hit the record button. So if let's say you're just shooting photos and, something happens and let's say you have 4K 120 slow-mo set to your C3, you're taking pictures of birds, all of a sudden you see a cool scene, you want to make a video, just hit the record button and the camera will automatically jump into shooting 4K 120 slow-mo in whatever settings you have set to your C3 setting. So that's pretty awesome. And the other thing that's pretty awesome here is save and load cam settings to card. As of right now, only the R5 and R3 have this setting, but you can actually take your settings, all the settings you just set up today after watching this video, and you can save it to a memory card, an SD card, and keep that in your backpack. I wouldn't save it to your main SD card because obviously you're going to format that card, you're going to lose everything. But go on eBay and find like a 5 gigger or 2 gigger kind of little small card, format it, pop it in there, and then save all your settings to the card, which is awesome. So let's say something happens to your R5, you need to get a loaner or you buy another R5, you can just easily take your settings and put it on the card or put it on the other camera. And you can also save multiple settings. So if you have settings for video shoots or settings for weddings, settings for nature photography, settings for landscapes, you can save all your settings onto a card and you can just pop it into your camera and load up whatever settings you need. Pretty cool, right? All right, so we're done with the menu settings, and now let's take a look at the quick menu. All right, so here we are on the back of the EOS R5, and I'm going to talk about the quick menu, or the Q menu as I like to call it. We have a little Q button here, physical button, and there's also a Q button on the LCD which you can touch, and it brings up this little quick menu where you can quickly adjust certain settings. So let's start at the first one. This is the autofocus menu. You can pick all your autofocus points depending on what you want to do. Like for example, if I'm shooting YouTube videos and I want to display a product in front of the camera, I'll click on this one, and you can see it gives me a nice big rectangle here on the screen, and you have to take off eye autofocus and the camera will focus on whatever's closer instead of focusing on my eyes, but it tends to want to focus on eyes quite a bit. So that's one of the things with the R5, it locks onto eyes. All right, so another thing you want to be careful of here is you see we have face tracking and eye tracking enabled. If you accidentally touch the screen in the wrong way, you can disable it. So just make sure you don't disable it by accident. All right, so next up, we have the movie record size, and we looked at this menu earlier. This is where you can jump in quickly and change your record size, or if you're running out of space on your memory card, you can quickly jump in and change it to IPB, IPB Lite, or 8K, 4K, 1080p, whatever you want. You can change your settings from here, which is great. And if you hit back, it closes it. All right, and now you have your audio recording levels, and you see here the 12, that's minus 12 dB. So you want to be peaking at minus 12 dB, and you can hit these arrows here to adjust your audio levels to make sure you're not clipping, which is really good. And right below that, we have a picture of some headphones, and this is your volume. So if you have headphones plugged into your camera and you're listening to your audio, this is where you will hear it. Next up is HDR movie recording. I don't really record any kind of HDR stuff, so I can't really talk about it. I'm sure there's videos on YouTube about the HDR recording if you're interested. All right, next we have Digital Movie IS. Right now I have it off. I'm locked onto a camera. Then we have Digital Movie IS and then Enhanced. And you can see how it crops in. And this is full frame, this is cropped in, this is closer to APS-C. So it crops in to create that digital stable, and this is super important for vloggers. So if you're vlogging, run and gun filmmaking, handheld camera, no gimbal, you want to mess around with these, just understand that you're going to crop in a little bit as you use it, but the stabilization on this camera is actually pretty good. Next up, we have cards. I only have one card in the camera right now, but you can select which card you want recordings to go to, so that's pretty cool. And then we have AWB, Auto White Balance. So you have all your auto white balance presets here. You can hit the arrow to go over, and you can dial in your custom white balance here if you want. Whatever you want to do. I like to get things a little more on the bluish side, so I'm at this number, but you can do it however you want. And then here we have our picture styles. So you have your built-in picture styles, and then you can also have your own presets that you can create. And it's not as fun as Fuji's film presets, but you can play around with that and you can create some cool looks, and then just save them to the camera, and anytime you want to use them you can just set them up. And next up we have Auto Lighting Optimizer, which I don't really use because it only affects JPEGs, and I don't even know if it has an effect on video or not, but I have highlight tone priority enabled, which preserves the highlights preserves the details in the highlights, which I think is way more important than this, so I don't even pay attention to this. So that's a quick tour of the quick menu. All right, my friends, you made it to the end, and now you are educated on the R5 video settings. If you found this video useful, definitely give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, share it with a friend. I would really appreciate it. Working hard to grow this channel, so any kind of help you guys could give me, definitely grateful for that. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.